How's it going, everybody? A question was asked on the last video that I posted, which was actually done last night, where I'm planning on doing CCNP version 2 for Switch. Since I've already done a route exam, I figured that would be a good starting point. So the question was asked, and I don't mention viewer or subscriber names, but if you read through the comments, you'll know which one I'm talking about. And the question was, it's a request question, is have you done a video on the minimum hardware requirements needed to set up a lab for CCNP? If not, could you entertain making a video on that? Oh, I say minimum because budget and space is at a premium over here, LOL. When you say over here, I'm presuming you mean the UK or somewhere over in Europe of some type, um, because usually if you don't mention over here if you're referring to anywhere in the States. So there's a couple other comments in here about um, iOS XR v9K and some other stuff, and yeah, it makes sense. Um, where I'm coming from with the minimum lab requirements, well, it depends on which exam you're talking about. If you're talking about route, if you're at all savvy with GNS3, you can do everything inside of GNS3. I would recommend 15 code if you can get it on the 7200s. 15x code will work, so anything you can find for 7200 will be sufficient. There will be a few limitations, like for instance, when we get into DMVPN and start doing cryptography, that may not be um, supported. But at the same point in time, there's other things that will be supported, like the fact that you'll be able to do EIGRP and OSPF and BGP, things like that. Um, when I do a video series, when I typically do one, I'm typically shooting for the ability to configure everything on the blueprint in one topology so that we could take and make it more realistic. So that means that if I'm going to be doing like for instance, I'm working on creating CCNP service writer route right now, which is analogous pretty much to the CCNP routing and switching route, where instead of focusing on OSPF and EIGRP, they swap EIGRP out for ISIS. They added in a couple other aspects like BFD and routing policy route policy languages in iOS XR. But beyond that, it's pretty much the exact same stuff, minus the cryptography and DMVPN, of course. So when I set up a lab, I'm usually I can scale out because I have the capability to scale out. I know that's not the case for everyone. So if when I go through and I'm teaching a series, I start off with I'll set up a section for OSPF, I'll set up a section for EIGRP, and then I'll run BGP for the interdomain routing so that you guys will be able to see exactly how that would work. So you'll see realistic configurations and how they would come into play. Now, for those of you that are not interested in doing a full-on potential realistic implementation of stuff to do like proof of concept, it is totally doable to do everything that for CCNP route in like 5 or 6 routers for um, CCNP route. Um, for instance, if you wanted to do like say 6 routers, I always shoot for the higher end if I can, but half a dozen routers, split a few of those routers into area 0, put one router into area 1, another router into area 2, and then put like another router that would be connecting to area 2, make that area 3 so you can study virtual links, you know. Um, so as a matter of fact, you guys should have seen paint set up here, so let me give you an example of what I mean by that. I was going to go full screen with this setup here, but okay, there's my thing. So like for instance, if you're studying for OSPF, I would say if you got 6 routers, do something like this. And then have another router over here, another router over here, and then another router over here. So there's your 6. So you could do these routers here are all connected to each other, and these guys are all in area 0, right? And then you have this router here in area 1, and then you can set up this connection here will be in area 2, and then this one will be here in area 3. So you'll have to set up a virtual link between here and here so that they'll be able to talk to each other. I mean, 6 routers, you can totally do everything on a blueprint for OSPF there. And you can, stick this guy here. This guy could be an NSSA. This guy could be, regular stub, stuff like that. EIGRP along the same lines. You can come in here and you have your 6 routers, do something very similar to that. You can have your backbone set up here, and you can have a stub network here, and you can have, like for instance, do something like that. That could be another potential. You could use the same topology, just rip out OSPF and replace it with EIGRP or vice versa, however you want to go about doing it. You could do that. Now, for DMBPN and frame relay, I would swap it around a little bit. I would have one router, because you can, in GNS3, you can utilize a frame relay switch or create a router to be a frame relay switch as well. There's a video that I shot on that a while back. It's actually, if you do a YouTube search for that, and let me go back to here, type in frame relay configuration in GNS3. Let's see if my video shows up. Let's see, does it show up? Yes, it does. Frame relay setup in GNS3. It's about 1,000 views or so. So if you click on that video and you go to it, what I've done is I created the topology is set up with 5 routers, so you could actually do it this way. The topology looks something like this. And then you have a frame relay switch up here. So you run the serial connections down here, and then you could do something like this if you're setting frame relay specifically. And then I also set up the connections like this, to where it's like that. And what this basically does is gives you the ability of doing the frame relay switch here. And then you also run router 1, can also be frame switches, and also just regular router too. You can do both, and you run with it that way. And then you can run your routing protocol over that. So what I would do here this would be a good example of DMBPN, because you're going to have your 3 spoke sites. Because frame relay is just going to be your layer 2 transport. So I was going to get your layer 2 operational. And then you can run BGP over the top of that. That is completely possible. And then you can run DMBPN over that. And I'm putting this, I'm climbing the levels here as you go along, because that's how you would logically do it. And then you could run like EIGRP over DMBPN. You could do OSPF. It's up to you on how you would want to move forward with that. But you could logically set it up to do that. Set up frame relay as your layer 2. You could set up BGP as your interconnectivity. So these could be remote sites, and you could set up, public autonomous systems. All of this can be done inside of GNS3. So if you've got a half a dozen routers, you could do it with less if you'd like, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be, you're still going to need at least a few routers to get this to work. Because I find it better the more routers you have, to spread it out and see exactly what the differences are going to look like, because you might be trying to understand how stub areas work versus non-so-stubby areas work in OSPF, and if you don't have them both running, you won't be able to take a look at the LSAs and understand how the LSAs are built. So that's how I would do that. Now for switch, because I know a lot of people are studying switch, I normally, there's no real way to do this in GNS3, so the typical way that I like to go about doing this is actually inside of, do this for the aspects of, where was I going with that? I was reading something else. The one thing you really need to focus on is GNS3 doesn't support switching, at least not well. And this is, there are ways of getting it to work, but in my opinion, they're all, I don't want to get into legal mumbo jumbo, but there are ways that GNS3 has integrated with using IOU and some other capabilities. My personal opinion is if you go and you get viral and you load up a few switches, or if you have switches, great. Connect to them and then use loopbacks as your reachability points. You could do that as well. So like for instance, if I was going to do switch, I would do 4 switches as a very basic setup. I would do 4 switches, and then what I would do is I would connect routers off the endpoints, and then that's 4, 5, and 6. Do something like that. Now, if you don't have physical hardware, no big deal. Viral gives you that flexibility. I usually, when I do a heavy involved, when I do CCNP version 2 switch, there's going to be like 8 switches, and I'm going to have it built out in a hierarchical manner like this, and it'll be something like this. And the reason for that is because we're going to want to have a core and something like this. Now this is just off the top of my head, and something like this. Do something to this degree, and then you can daisy chain a couple of routers off of it for, just end hosts and things like that. And this is going to give you that flexibility to come in here and working on your access layer. You're going to have your distribution, you're going to have your core, and see exactly how that plays out. You won't be able to do stack-wise, but that's not a big deal. You won't be able to do span, but that's not a big deal. But you will be able to focus on multiple spanning tree. You will be able to focus on rapid spanning tree. You will, and by default, all these switches actually run in rapid spanning tree protocol by default. So if you want to study IEEE, you'll have to turn that on. So you'll have to disable RSTP and let it run just IEEE regular 802.1d. So there's that. But beyond that, I mean, hardware is, I'm sure not everybody's got the room and space that I do. If you've got two or three switches, run with that. Upgrade the code to the highest levels you can and play with it. Read the documentation. Make sure you understand the technology. And if you don't, I'm hopefully going to be able to answer that question for you. I know, and one of the reasons why I go a little over the top with some of my labs is because the fact that some people can't. So you'd want a detailed breakdown to how this stuff would work. And that's why I do it the way that I do it. I usually go a little over the top, so you guys will see real world examples, because I know not everybody works in, you might not be, if you're working on CCNP, my presumption is you are a analyst or an engineer of some level, and you work on equipment, whether you're more of a see why something's not working and pass it out to the engineering team to fix it, or you're an engineer and you're trying to work your way up to, architect or something, whatever the case might be. The main part here is that when you're getting in here and you're working on this stuff, it's important to understand the hierarchy, why things work the way that they do, why you'd want to, you won't be able to do VPC between these two, and you normally wouldn't want to have squares. You'd want to have triangles wherever you can, and that's going to be the beneficial. We got a triangle right here, got a triangle right here. You got a triangle here. Technically speaking, this is a triangle, because the access layer switches should never touch each other. So, or be directly connected to each other, unless you have a reason for that. But, I mean, that's where it's at. It's really hard to give you guys an exact number. Like, if you were to download Viral, I would give it, I don't know what the minimum requirements are. You'd have to look at Viral for your platform. But like you could do CCNP switch with like I'd say 2 to 3 switches. You could totally do that. You'd need one with the layer 3 image and at least one with the layer 2 image. I mean, there's beyond that, that's really all you would need. And then another router attached to that, and you'd be able to do router on a stick, and then connect them all together. So theoretically speaking, you could do all of that. You could totally do it. That's actually how I studied for CCNP switch. I went out and I had a few switches, I plugged them together, and made them work. I just had routers that acted as end hosts. Now I have Viral and I have other capabilities that allow me to do the more advanced capabilities, but it's still what it is. So that'll give you an idea of how you go about doing that. So yeah, that's pretty much where it's at. I can't think of anything else that would be really beneficial to you guys. Trying to think. There are ways, and I've shot videos on how to integrate things like I'm just trying to think of any other options that are out there for you guys, and I can't think of anything other than real hardware. You could do rack rentals. INE usually has some pretty good ones. There's some other stuff out online that you can get. There's some freebie stuff. Try Packet Tracer. I mean, Packet Tracer will help you with some things, but I mean, you won't be able to do every command possibility and option, but at least it'll give you something a platform to follow from. That's pretty much all I can tell you, really. I mean, it's really hard to take it any further than that, but it is what it is. So But I hope that answers your question, and go from there. You guys take care.